I'm Janice Arch. I'm the current president for the Wild Ones Greater Cleveland chapter. This is our November chapter meeting. So welcome and thank you. Um, so a little bit about us. Wild Ones promotes native landscapes through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. We kind of touched on, we like to kind of chat about what we're seeing in our gardens right now to kick us off. So, um, we talked about this last month of what seed heads might be stealing the show in your yard right now. The images you see on the last slide and on this one are of some lovely native ornamental grasses that you might be seeing right now. I know I saw maybe not so much a seed head, but I realized that someone down the street from us has red twig dogwood, like a big cluster of them, and I never noticed it until just this week or this weekend because now all the leaves are gone. You can see all the red stems, so that was exciting. Um, but does anybody else have anything fun that is maybe showing off in your yard right now? Allison, I know you. What do you got? Anything good?
Yeah, the blue false indigo has those cool seed pods that sound like rattles when they shake because
Oh
they're
yeah.
fun. Baptisia.
Yes, that's a good one.
I'm still in love with my fragrant aster is still just blooming like crazy and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I've got these three giant blue shrubs in my yard right now and it's gorgeous. So the
It's awesome.
blooms are stealing the show.
Lovely. Love to hear it. Thanks, Kim. Oh, Mary
Mary
Louise
Lou,
has her
mine is
witch
too.
hazel and a photo. She's posting a photo in the chat in case anybody wants to see it. Oh, that's awesome. I'm jealous.
As of like a couple days ago, some of my gardens, like particularly my adopted spot, had a couple of purple coneflowers still going, definitely some black-eyed Susans, wreath goldenrod still going, and then a second bloom of spiderwort. It
Oh,
it went back for a few months and then started blooming again like last week.
that's weird,
Mhm. I've seen it
but
before.
lovely.
It's one of the rare ones that does that. Like that one and some of the irises will do like second blooms like
Yeah,
way later than I don't think anyone's pollinating it. So,
that's very interesting.
yeah.
I love spiderwort, so I would love. I don't think I ever saw mine rebloom um, at my old house. Does anybody else have anything exciting going on in their yards right now? All right, we shall move forward. And here's some more lovely grass. I know this isn't I don't know, the prettiest looking picture, but I think it is a nice look at what a native landscape could look like in the winter. This is, oh shoot, when I grabbed the picture, I saw what it was, and now I can't think of what it is. Um, I'm the worst storyteller sometimes. My husband tells me this all the time because I'll start something and then it's gone. So I will figure out what it is and get back to you. But I just thought it was really nice how you could see kind of like that brown along the hillside and it looks like birch, maybe even aspen in the background. All right, so tonight we have a little extra surprise. Um, Wild Ones, the national nonprofit, did their photo contest this year, and two of the winners are actually members of the Greater Cleveland chapter. So we were going to share their photos, um, and hopefully, I think um, Kevin, are you one, right? Or no? I feel like O'Brien was the right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, okay, good. We sent out a little special invitation to the wonderful artists who took the photos to see if they could join us tonight. So thank you. And then we're going to chat with Allison Welch and Antonio Zada about invasive species management, which is great to hunker down once it's cold and learn about so that way once springtime comes, you can be educated and be ready to go to manage your invasive species. And then we're going to talk about our annual meeting registration, our holiday celebration, um, some chapter updates, and then pass into other upcoming events we have coming up through the winter. All right, so let's get to these fun um, photos. So first, we have in the category of living things. This was I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name, Andy. Trying to see, are you on? I'm looking at the names. I don't see Andy, but look at this lovely hummingbird um, getting
Great.
uh, some nectar from some jewelweed. This is absolutely fantastic and can definitely see why it was chosen as a first place winner. So congratulations, Andy, on this one. And then Kevin's photo, who's here, he got first place for home landscape. This is a gorgeous composition. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your photo, Kevin?
Sure. This is a shot of my backyard. The house is on the right side, and that's my neighbor's shed there in the distance. But it just so happened to be a really foggy morning, as I do every morning. I'm walking around the yard just to see what's flying around, what's blooming, how the plants are doing. It's my little Zen moment for the day. But anyway, I was walking through the garden, turned around, and right there on the late figwort, which was about 4.5, 5 feet tall. I saw this spider web that was backlit by the rising sun, and I'm like, oh wow, look at that! And I just took the photo with my phone, and just it was kind of like a surprise. And lo and behold, it won. So I was pretty excited about that.
Right place, right time.
Yeah, exactly. And
No,
it was
that's great.
yeah,
The
kind of a foggy
fog,
morning too.
it's gorgeous. Especially, is that Liatris blooming in the back? The
No,
pink?
that's marsh phlox right there.
Oh, okay.
Which if anyone is not using that, that is just such an adaptable, long blooming, trouble-free plant.
Lovely. What, if you don't mind me asking, what part of town do you live in?
I'm in Amherst, right
Okay.
off of South Lake before Middle Ridge.
Okay. Lovely. Well, thank you so much for
Hmm.
even, submitting and congratulations on this
Oh, thank
lovely
you.
photo.
Appreciate it.
And thanks for joining us tonight on short
No
notice.
problem.
All right. Okay. So we have Allison and Antonio gonna do an overview of invasive ecology, defining invasive versus aggressive, some plant ID, phenology, types of removal with tools, safety, a few things of what to plant instead, and the need to replace with native species. So I'll give Antonio's intro first. He's a native to the city of Cleveland, where he runs his ecological consulting company, Paradise Natives. He's a graduate of Ohio State's Ecosystem Restoration Program and has enjoyed several years of experience working on projects across our state's varied landscapes. And he serves as our chapter's community garden chair. Allison is a board member of ours and has worked in horticulture at the Blue Mitch Park Zoo. Kendall Oberlin is an active member of the Lakewood Tree Advisory and Education Board. Right now, she is employed through the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. She's pursuing her degree in sustainable agriculture at LCCC. So with that, I will turn it over. I'm going to stop sharing. Um, and turn it over to, I think I'm gonna stop sharing. There we go. And turn over to Allison and Antonio. You're muted, Allison.
Okay,
There you
thank
go.
you. Trying to get everything going. All right, let's
Yep.
put presenter. Let's see how this goes. Oh, what are invasive species? All right, so wait, I wanted to go back one. What are native species? Let's start with that. So I think most people here are aware of what a native species is, but just to make sure that we're starting from the basics, so Wild Ones calls native species any plants that occur naturally in a particular region, ecosystem, or habitat before European settlement. So these are the plants that evolved in this region before 1492 when Columbus came over. These are the plants that the Native Americans used for their food source and their pharmacy for thousands of years. And they are the most important part of our ecosystem. They lead the way in keeping the habitat for our wildlife and everything natural that's going on. They're crucial for that ecological health. So native plants, yay. Let's go on. All right. So today we're talking about invasive species. So let's just make sure we're talking about the same thing here. What are invasive species? They are non-native plants that quickly reproduce and outcompete the native plants. They can cause environmental harm, economic harm, or harm to human health. That's kind of our definition we're going with. And kind of to show an example of what this is like, here's the species that we are talking about. Right now, you're going to see a lot of Amur honeysuckle, or there's a bunch of different honeysuckles that are invasive to this area. Right now, their leaves are still on them in general, so you can kind of pick them out at the moment because they still look really lush. And that's part of why the honeysuckle is an issue for this area. They keep their leaves so long that they cause shade, and that shade doesn't allow the native plants that would normally be here to survive underneath them. They become a bush very quickly, and they are not from here. They're, I think, from Asia. And the berries are also an issue because birds will come and eat the berries, and the birds love the berries, but they're like a snack food. They're not actually nutritious for the birds. So they won't put on the weight that they need if they're migrating. They don't have the fats in them. So the birds will just kind of take them back into the woods or any other area, and in their droppings, the seeds will become new plants. And so we get these honeysuckles everywhere, and they're really hard to get out once they get big. So we'll talk about how to get these type of plants out, but we're going to talk a little bit more. Oh, also, native plants, just to make this really clear, native plants are never considered invasive. So I've heard people sometimes say things that are incorrect, like about common milkweed, for example. And people will say, oh, common milkweed is invasive. That's not correct. Common milkweed spreads quickly, but it's a native plant. So we would call that aggressive. So if we're talking about a native plant, we're saying it's aggressive. And if we're talking about a non-native plant, one that's not from here, that would be invasive. Let's keep going. So, oh, and there's a literature link. I will put that in the chat at the end. Okay, let's go on. Where is it going to the next one? There we go. Antonio?
Yeah. So, by the way, Allison, I found that I was clicking through earlier, and I think there are a couple points where it gets stuck where you just need to like click it 5 times to advance to the next slide. So just for next, it's anyway. So we want to talk about what specifically makes something a successful invasive plant. So as Allison said, in order to be classified as invasive, it has to have originated on, usually we say, a different continent. Sometimes it could be on a different side of the same continent. And it will typically, when it's dispersed to a new place, it's going to find conditions that were relatively similar to where that plant was native, because every invasive plant is native somewhere. And so what it's going to have where it's invasive is a lack of evolutionary checks and balances. So you hear of the concept of coevolution, where kind of every organism in a population, in a community rather, is going through this evolutionary arms race, where one species is developing a trait that would give it some advantage over another species, say something it's in competition with, or something that might be a predator, or it might be its prey, and that other species, that other population is evolving resistance or additional competition. And with invasive species, you are dropping a novel, in this case, we're talking about plants, into an ecosystem where it has no checks and balances. And if it's successful, it'll exploit that niche very well. You can think of something like let's say, a daffodil, where it's a non-native species, it's a cultivated species, and when you put it in your yard or your landscape, maybe over 5, 10, 20 years, you might get double or triple the amount of daffodils that you've originally started with. They're going to spread kind of slowly. But if there were ever any sort of high functioning native ecosystem in that same space, those daffodils would very quickly lose their population, because that plant just doesn't have the proper traits in this kind of setting to become invasive. So we call that just something that's non-native, not invasive. So defining invasiveness is all about these functional traits, and some of them will include what's called allelopathy. So that's just a fancy word that means that the species, the plant, produces chemicals that inhibit the growth of its competition, other plants. We were talking about honeysuckle earlier. Allison was showing some photos of that, and she talked about how the honeysuckle will be one of the first plants to leaf out in the spring and one of the last plants to leaf out in the fall, which means that it's occupying that early niche and that late niche seasonally that other plants are not adapted to. And so it's taking that cover before the rest of those plants have a chance to even fight. So that niche is being occupied. And when those leaves of the honeysuckle fall to the ground and they decay into the soil, they release certain toxic chemicals that are inhibiting the growth of anything that isn't more honeysuckle. Now, where honeysuckle is native in Asia, the plants that are growing in the same communities as the Amur honeysuckle have developed some resistance to that. So the other plants have a fighting chance. Here, when you see these woodland understories, particularly in southern Ohio, but it's pretty bad here too, you will find almost nothing but Amur honeysuckle. Another trait that they use is high propagule pressure. So these plants, even where they're native, they're typically quite aggressive. They're typically early successional species, or you can call them pioneer species. So they tend to very quickly colonize a space after a disturbance event. And that is just because they are, often, sometimes relatively short-lived, live fast, die young kinds of plants that really, their evolutionary function or their ecological function where they're native is to kind of heal that soil, is to be the band-aid over the recent disturbance. You see a field In the below picture of what looks like either Canada goldenrod or tall goldenrod, Saudago canadensis or altissima, or probably a combination of both. And those are two species that are very aggressive in the United States. One of those species that, like Allison said, many people who aren't familiar with the terminology might confuse with being invasive. Now, one of these species, like milkweed, like Canada goldenrod, that are very aggressive here, you can almost bet that in similar conditions in Europe and Asia, where they have been introduced, they are going to be invasive. And in fact, Canada goldenrod, tall goldenrod, and milkweeds are very invasive in those places because they share a lot of the same traits that those European or those Asian invasive species to us have, but they just don't have that niche and they don't have that that evolutionary check and balance. So let's continue with the next slide. So we can talk a little bit about why we have invasive species in the first place. And it's important to remember that the definition of an invasive species is inherently tied to human beings. So before the human species evolved and before we were moving around, quite like we do, you had what were called dispersal events, where a bird that was migrating from North America to South or vice versa might have gotten some seeds stuck in its feathers that then germinated thousands of miles away from where that species originally existed, or some seeds being carried by water or spores being carried by air currents and going just much, much farther than they typically would, and then populations establishing hundreds or thousands of miles away. And that was part of evolution at that time, and those events were rare, and they would sometimes cause large local changes to ecosystems. But over time, the surrounding ecological communities would adapt and evolve to be new checks and balances to those kinds of plants and animals. And what we're doing as human beings through largely globalization, trade, and travel is making millions of these dispersal events happen every single day for the past 500 plus years. So there are so many more opportunities for these plants and animals and fungi and spores to get from place A to place B, where they have a shot at exploiting a new niche. And because of development and habitat loss and all of these things, there is a very fair amount of exploitable sites across our landscapes. So invasive species, they can get here by, like I said, through shipping, like in ballast water. As you've heard of the zebra mussels that we have in Lake Erie, throughout the Great Lakes. So those came from Asia in ballast water that ships took in and then let out in the Great Lakes. So I don't remember if that was like 20, 30 years ago when that started. Shipping pallets. Rail is one of the largest distributors of invasive species. You see in the photo an invasive that we're going to talk about later. That's Ailanthus altissima, the tree of heaven. And you'll see on almost any rail line in the Midwest, if you're looking just off, you're going to see so many of those. They're being spread through trade. And sometimes these are accidental, and sometimes they're purposeful. So think about the pet trade and rare reptiles such as Burmese pythons that were brought to the United States, specifically Florida. These pythons are native to Southeast Asia, and they get brought into places like Miami, and they either escape from their owners, or their owners realize that these, this 12-inch snake that they bought is now 16 feet long, and they don't know what to do with it, so they just let it out, and it escapes to the Everglades, and it wreaks havoc on the local ecosystem. You remember an example of biological controls that is really famous. I think that this happened I think it began in the 1930s. It's a really key example of invasive of invasion biology, and that's the cane toads in Australia. And I think it was in the 1930s when sugarcane, which is native to, I think, Papua New Guinea, so pretty close to Australia, it might be native to Australia too. Sugarcane was being farmed in Australia, and it had a pest called, I think they were called cane beetles or sugar beetles. And these beetles would lead to some dramatic loss of the crop. And so the Australian government had this bright idea of bringing in a an animal from South America called the cane toad that would hopefully get rid of all of their sugar beetles, their cane beetles. And what ended up happening was these cane toads did eat. They were very successful for the farmers, but then they also ate everything else, and they spread and broke their containment like just a raging fire throughout. And I think that they're in the entire continent of Australia now. Significant ecological damage. And of course, agriculture and the nursery industry. The nursery and horticultural industries in this country are responsible for, gosh, almost all of our worst offending invasive plants that were originally sold as ornamentals. And that's probably going to be almost all of the ones that we talk about today. So you can go to the next slide, please.
Sure. Actually, so we're going to go to the next slide and this one. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few different plants, and I want people to kind of just, I'll describe them. We'll kind of take a look at them, and then decide whether they sound like they're invasive or not. Maybe some of them aren't. We'll talk about it. So here's common buckthorn. This is one that we pull out all the time. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Let's see if it's invasive. Okay, so it's a scraggly looking shrub or tree. If you see that bottom picture, they kind of grow erratically in the way I see it. The berries are red when they're early and black, and they have a laxative effect on birds. It grows quickly, spreads easily. Those birds eat those and they poop them, and then the seeds grow. New ones everywhere. It's native to Europe. So is this invasive? What do you think? Anybody could unmute and just say yes or put a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, so you know this. This one is definitely invasive. Common buckthorn. Let's go to another one. We've got butterfly bush here. We see this all the time in people's pollinator gardens. It's a pretty shrub. It's got fragrant purple flowers. It attracts butterflies, moths, hummingbirds, right? We have butterflies all over this beautiful shrub. It doesn't have a lot of nutritional value for migrating butterflies. So the monarchs come by and like I said about the other, about the honeysuckle berries, same idea with the migrating butterflies. It's kind of like a snack food. They love it, but it doesn't give them all the nutrition they need. And it's got no natural predators. So none of the bugs in our area are really going for this one. It's native to Asia. So do we think this one is invasive or not? What do you think? Oh, I see a thumbs up from Janice. Let's see. Participants like that up. Anybody else have thumbs up? Yeah, so this one's kind of interesting. In Ohio, this one is not listed as invasive yet. So it, in general, like our seasons kind of keep it where it's planted. However, in the more southern states, it has become invasive. So it is actually like a listed invasive species in other states. I don't think it's yet in Ohio. However, I have seen it jump out of this, like it jumped out of cultivation. I've seen it on the sides of stream beds that we're restoring. So I do know that it has now become invasive. So maybe even if it's not labeled that, and it's so common and beautiful, it still can be very invasive. So this one is definitely one I've pulled out. I planted when I was gonna make a pollinator garden in my front yard. I planted 4 of them. My wife and I put them all in. And we have now pulled them all out because I don't want to be part of that, especially since climate change is happening. The climate is getting a little bit warmer here. We're not getting those hard frosts that kill things off as much. And plants are acting differently than they would have maybe just even a few years ago. So we just have to be really, really careful. I know some people love their, you think this one plant is not going to do anything, and then 3 years later, bam, it becomes this huge problem. So we have to be very careful. I would be very careful if you have this, maybe put it into a pot or something. I tried that. They all died in my pot. So I won't give you, I don't know what to do. I'm just like, you know what, let's slow down the planting of the butterfly bush. And if you see it doing something that it shouldn't be doing or coming up in a place where it shouldn't be, I wouldn't plant it there. I would pull it out. I really don't think we should be having this one because there's so many wonderful native species that we do have that are good for the butterflies, that attract them just as much. So sorry, butterfly bush. I'm sure it's beautiful in Asia where it is from. Let's keep going. Here's another one. What do we have? Come on. Next. There we go. Hey, tree of heaven. This is the one that Antonio was talking about. You'll see it on the sides. You'll see it on roadsides. You'll see it on the side of the train tracks, like he was saying. I actually have a picture of it by a roadside here. Cool looking, kind of. It looks exotic, right? Grows really fast. And it's the tree of heaven. So let's take a look. It's a quick growing tree with clusters of yellow and green flowers. I don't actually usually see those flowers too much. It stinks. If you're trying to identify this one, you're going to crush up a leaf and smell it. I say it smells like sour peanut butter. There's like a citrusy yuck smell to it. Once you smell it once, you'll be like, that's exactly what this is. Also, sometimes it looks like, in my opinion, sometimes people mistake it for sumac, which is native. So the smell test is probably the best way you'll know. It also doesn't, it's it's a smooth stem, not fuzzy. So some of our sumacs are fuzzy, and that's how you'll know that is the difference. So with this one, tree of heaven, if you cut this down, you're like, oh my gosh, that's tree of heaven. You cut it right off. Babies will come up everywhere from the roots. The roots spread out pretty far, and then you have a huge problem on your hands. It is the host plant also to the spotted lanternfly, which we know is also an invasive species. So you will see them just covering the trunks and the leaves and everything of the tree of heaven. So yes, it's a native to Asia, and I think I've already mentioned it is definitely invasive. Yeah, we do not want this one around. Okay, so we're going to learn how to get rid of it. Let's see. Come on. Why would this go to the next slide? Okay, so we've got a few other common woody invasives that I'll just kind of go through quickly. Japanese barberry. This one also has little berries. It's got small little red shrub or small little leaves that are green or red. It's a shrub. It's got horrible spines. It's so annoying to pull out. You'll see it everywhere. People have planted these. I think in the 90s, this was the bush that everybody's mom planted in their front yard. It is everywhere. And the thing is, those birds will eat those berries, take them into the woodlands, and you'll see woodlands that are completely covered in them, which is absolutely no fun to pull out. And they take over like some of those really pristine areas of woodlands that would normally have like spring ephemerals coming up. Instead, you've got this shrub layer that is dense. So another one, oh, okay, it flipped on its own. We've got burning bush, similar idea. People plant these still. I see them at like Aldi all the time. So like this is still a very common one. It also has green leaves that turn red, berries that birds disperse, so common. What was I gonna? Oh, there is a native burning bush, and I should have mentioned that about a couple of the others that we've talked about. There are native varieties of these, and I think Antonio's slides later kind of talk about some alternatives or maybe the native ones. I can't remember, but so it's really important to double check. So if you want to use, I use Picture This. It's an app to identify plants. It's pretty darn good. And then it makes it easier to identify like the native one from the invasive one. Google Lens kind of works too, just kind of keep double checking when you get an identification, because certain things I've found are not exactly perfect on the apps. Let's talk one more time about calorie pear. Oh, I was gonna bring it. I took a video the other day. Okay, calorie pear or Bradford pear is a small tree. It can kind of be shrubby, but mostly it's a tree. It's got a really beautiful shape, really pretty flowers. It stinks. The flowers smell horrible. I won't tell you what it smells like. You can look that up. It spreads by suckers and by birds because there are these little tiny fruits that come up. They're not like any fruit you'd want to eat. It's just a little hard thing. You'll see these everywhere on the street. It's a common street tree. It's illegal to sell them now. If you want to see them, look at any bank parking lot or anywhere that the Cleveland Clinic has, because if you go down the street, I'm telling you, Opportunity Corridor, where it goes by the Cleveland Clinic, it's just like calorie pears the whole way down.
All of their campus parking lots, it is wild. It's like, I think it must have been their favorite tree.
Yeah, they must have gotten a good deal on them. That's what I thought. So yeah, I can't believe it. So anyway, but they're awful. Like and they don't last super long. Their wood is soft, so they kind of fall over anyway. But those little sucker roots will turn in a whole, like an open area or a disturbed area will turn into all calorie pears. So it is a big problem to have those too. Okay, this is just from Wild Ones. Antonio, I'm going to take you to the next slide, and we'll talk about how to get rid of these. How do we deal with them?
Yeah. So, all hope is not lost. Although these invasive plants can have such a detrimental impact on our landscapes and in our own properties, there are ways to get rid of them, even with 100% success. You can see on the left, it's our old friend, the Amber honeysuckle, Lonicera macchii. And that's a photo I took just the other day down in Columbus, in one of what I call the old growth honeysuckle forests, because those individuals, kind of hard to tell from the perspective in that photo, but those are 15 to 18 feet tall, and they've got a spread of like 20 feet plus. These are massive with trunks like this. I mean, just enormous. They've been growing for years and years and years. And on the right, that is the vine that ate the South. That is kudzu. It's native to Japan. And if you're driving down the interstate, some of our southern states, and unfortunately, even now in parts of southern Ohio along the Ohio River, that's what you see. That is ecological devastation at its finest. So what can we do? You can go ahead and switch it. We have to keep them in control, in the places that we have control of. And for most of us, that means our yards. So what can we do with some of these? So today we're specifically talking about woody invasive species, but we're going to note some of the herbaceous ones as well. Mechanical control, particularly when your invasion is, let's say, more mild. It is a very viable, if backbreaking, option. You will really get to know your property and your soil if you elect to do it this way. This is one of my favorite tools in the top right. It is called a cutting matic, and it's got a blade that's kind of parallel with the handle that you use to cut roots, and then it's got a pry bar that's perpendicular to the handle that you use to pry things up, and it can be used along with a shovel to dig out, small to medium-sized invasive shrubs with a minimal need to make huge holes and make a lot of disturbance. You can also pool, dig, particularly like let's say with really small invasive shrubs when especially after a good soak of rain, the day before, sometimes those things will go right out. Same thing with some of the more herbaceous plants like garlic mustard, for example. It's one of the first things that greens up in the spring, and it kind of very easily just comes out, roots and all. And with most of these plants, you really want to make sure that you're getting the entire root system out. Otherwise, you are playing, a Sisyphus game. So, for example, Canadian thistle, it's an herbaceous, really nasty, invasive, and it is clonal. So it's forming a network and it spreads underground. And you can pull all of those up in your yard and they will be right back because you are not able to get the entire root system out. So, and then again, you want to be really careful. Like when you're weeding your garden, your vegetable garden, if you're hand weeding, you're minimizing disturbance to the soil. If you take a hoe or a rake and you open up that soil, you're creating an environment for more of those soil seeds, more seeds in the soil seed bank to come back up, and you're going to get more of those invasives. So Allison's now going to talk about her favorite tool for pulling out invasive shrubs.
Yeah, I love this tool. It's called the uprooter. I'm going to show you a video about it. We use this at the zoo for the honeysuckle, but it's good for anything with, like a 2-inch or less stalk. So let's do this.
So now that I've explained the basic operations, let's see how it works on a plant. Here we have a piece of Scotch broom and a glass. And from the root to your limb, like I said, I'm going to bring the stationary jaw up against.
You're muted.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I love that tool. It's awesome. Let me go back to the Zoom or the slideshow. Sorry. Where'd it go? There we are. Okay. Yeah, really useful. It feels awesome to pull out all the roots with that. And that's the best part of it.
So we talked about literally yanking these things out of the ground. What about just cutting them down? Like if we have a problem tree in our front yard that needs to get taken down, we get a tree company to come and they cut it down, and then it's no longer a problem. Um, but if you have some really large invasives, what if you have 6,000 invasives on your property or an area that you're managing? Well, we were talking earlier about functional traits, and one of the traits that almost all of these invasive trees and shrubs exhibit is a vigorous tendency to resprout. I have a picture of the Hydra, like in ancient Greece, that myth of the creature with the 10 heads. And when you try to kill it by cutting off one of the heads, it sprouts 10 more from that one stump. That's kind of what you deal with some of these invasives. That is a absolutely massive, probably my record, burning bush down the corner. You can't, doesn't, the picture doesn't really do it justice, but I mean, you could like stick 10 people under that thing. It was absolutely massive. And if all we did was cut that thing down, you would get hundreds and hundreds of resprouts because the plant is sending a signal. It thinks it's being eaten. And so it is trying to protect itself, and it sends a signal to grow more wildly in more of a shrub form. And now you're dealing with, like in the case of the tree of heaven, hundreds where you were originally dealing with just one or two. You can go to the next slide. So that leaves us to the what is sometimes the difficult thing to talk about, which is herbicide. And herbicide is unfortunately one of the most important tools that the restoration practitioner or someone who is interested in destroying invasives and preserving biodiversity, it is one of the most important tools in our toolkit. And functionally, we would not be able to remedy habitats, ecosystems that have been invaded without it. So it really is the first step. You can go to the next slide. So we want to start by defining what an herbicide is or what a pesticide is, because it's kind of a scary word. An herbicide, the dictionary definition is a substance, a chemical used to inhibit or destroy unwanted plant growth. And that's all it is. There's really nothing more about it. Everything else about herbicide is a connotative definition, not a denotative definition. So, of course, when we think of that word, a lot of negative things come to mind. Some herbicides, for example, are very threatening to non-target organisms. You might apply it on one thing that you're trying to kill, but it ends up killing everything else around it. Some of them have a very high risk of leaching into the surrounding environment, kind of similar. Sometimes they are harmful to human health or animal health, and sometimes they can persist in the soil for months or fundamentally alter the chemical or physical structures of those soils. Now, one herbicide that actually fills all of those attributes that I described right there is something that we typically see people supporting as a natural alternative remedy to some of the more manufactured chemicals, and that's high concentrations of salt and vinegar. So if you take a 10% plus vinegar solution and mix it with salt, yes, that's absolutely going to at least top kill some of your plants. It's also going to affect everything else around it. And if it's highly acidic, and if you get that on your skin, or if you breathe in the volatilized vapors, be very damaging to humans. And the high acidity and the salinity will alter your soil's chemical structure for quite a long time. So it's important to remember, that one herbicide is not an herbicide is not an herbicide. They're all very different. They have different mechanisms for uptake, and just because something is quote unquote natural doesn't mean it's safe, and vice versa. So we have to think of these things as tools. I kind of liken them to something like chemotherapy or taking a medicine that might have a small side effect, but is preventing the onset of symptoms of a horrible chronic condition that might otherwise, in this example, kill you, but in this case, destroy the ecosystem. So it's all about proper, safe handling. It's all about using the proper equipment, the proper PPE, having the right experience and training, holding an herbicide applicator's license, understanding the formula, the different methods of uptake, understanding which ones one is comfortable with using, which ones you're not comfortable with using. The method, we'll talk about methods. There's a few different ways of introducing this onto the kinds of invasive plants that you want to make sure are dead and don't come back in such a way that has a minimal impact to anything else around it, including the applicator. And you have to think about things like timing. We talked about phenology earlier. Plants have seasons. They leaf out, they are absorbing most of their solar energy in the summer, and then they senesce and die back in the fall, and then they're dormant through the winter. So all of these things we're thinking about when we're talking about how to best, most safely use these chemicals in our battle against invasive species. You can go to the next slide, please. It's very important also to remember that when it comes to use on invasives, when it comes to restoration, or even using these things in our own properties, this is, I couldn't find the exact numbers in time for this, but it is such a minuscule fraction of the amount of the frequency and the concentration that is used every day on our pristine lawns and in our agricultural industry. I mean, a lot of that stuff is frankly abhorrent, and I really think that our anger and contempt for some of these things really needs to go towards that, particularly in the lawn care industry, for these, in my opinion, very useless applications of these chemicals with really no regard to the living world around them when they're being used broadly on preserving lawns. And it's quite a problem in agriculture as well. Granted, we need food more than we need lawns, but I think that's people's anger and animosity toward these things really needs to be focused away from invasives, because we really need them in order to combat invasives. Another part about using herbicides in restoration is that the idea is that it's eventually finite. We use these once or twice, or we use the bulk of it at the very beginning when we're trying to ameliorate an ecosystem, whether that's our yard or something larger. And eventually we want to get to the point where we almost never have to use them. And that is not the same with lawns and agricultural systems. These things are being applied year in, year out, every season. So there's quite a difference. And next slide, please. So we can talk about one of the most common ways of actually using these products for invasive species control. And we'll talk about cut stump applications and hack and squirt. So with cut stump application, you're taking a solution of glyphosate, and glyphosate is a enzyme inhibitor in vascular plants. So its mode of action is it acts like a substrate for an enzyme that helps plants with their growth. And it tricks plants, to be anthropomorphic about it, tricks plants into thinking that it is that substrate. And a plant enzyme will bind to that instead of the actual substrate, and it will cause the plant to eventually stop growing and die. And we are able to very safely, securely apply like a fraction of a milliliter of effectively this chemical to each and every large shrub and tree that we want to take out by using the cut stump method. So where we, as in the picture on the right, cut, it's probably a honeysuckle, cut it all the way down to just a few inches above the ground, and then immediately using a Dauber bottle, a bingo marker that has a 20% glyphosate solution with blue indicator dye, which is also partly a safety precaution and partially a way to help you know where you've applied. You just go around the outer bark, the cambium, that the living layer of the plant tissue, with that's certainly less than a milliliter of chemical there, and it doesn't get anywhere else, and it dries quickly. And after it rains, anything that washes into the soil, it very quickly is absorbed and breaks down. And it doesn't survive in the soil for very long, and it's undetectable very quickly. Whereas, some of these chemicals that they're using to treat lawns, or some of these chemicals, like I mentioned, vinegar, can have very long lasting impacts in the soil and might kill soil microbiota. This doesn't affect any. Now, of course, there are other herbicides that we use in restoration that do, but glyphosate, for a lot of the bad press that it gets, it's one of the safest when handled properly and used properly and used in accordance with USDA and FDA, it's USDA and EPA regulations, incredibly safe. The other method of control that we're going to talk about is the hack and squirt method. And so we talked about tree of heaven, the host for the spotted lanternfly, and one of the invasives that's really getting the stick in the past couple of years, I think, because of that, for good reason. As Allison said, if you cut that down, even if you don't treat the stump, or even if you do treat the stump rather, that tree is going to send a signal to its roots saying it is under attack. And before that glyphosate would reach those roots and kill the entire system, it is going to send up enough signal for hundreds and hundreds of babies, and you're going to have a problem for a very, very long time. So what you have to do is kind of trick the tree into not thinking it's been cut down. And this works with a few others, but you essentially take a hatchet, and for every inch of diameter that tree is, you make an incision, an oblique incision around it. And then you fill it again with something like a milliliter or less per cut into this tree. And it doesn't go anywhere else, and it stays on the tree, and eventually the tree dies, and it can be felled by chainsaws or other means. So we are going to be, hopefully this spring or summer, sometime in 2026, Allison and I are going to be hosting kind of the next level to this, where we're going to do more of a hands-on workshop to show everybody, practically how we can get rid of invasives in our yard and landscape. And, I understand people's frustration or apprehension around some of these things, and there is certainly the wrong ways of handling these things, and it's important to have somebody who is experienced, or to have somebody trusted, or just to read the label and understand how these things work before going and doing them yourself. So hopefully after this talk, and after especially getting a hands-on workshop with some of these dauber bottles, we can, kind of collectively as a group, be a little bit more comfortable with invasives as a whole. And now I know we're kind of pressed for time, so I just want to quickly go through some alternatives to these invasive species. So we can just run through these really quickly, Allison. So burning bush, we have Euonymus. I forget what the species epithet is, but the native eastern wahoo should be planted far more. It's gorgeous, looks very similar to burning bush, still has that blazing red color, but it's native and it actually feeds the organisms around us. Witch hazel, another phenomenal one. Someone in the chat was talking about how theirs is blooming. One of the only plants that blooms in the fall or winter in Northeast Ohio. So cool. Native alternatives for calorie pair. We've got service berries, a few different species, wild American plum. These are gorgeous displays of white flowers that the pollinators go crazy for, and then the wildlife, some of the other animal wildlife goes crazy for their berries, particularly service berries. They are called June berries because they put their berries out in late May, early June, before a lot of other berries are produced, and the songbirds just go crazy for them. Plant that instead of the calorie pair garbage. If you want a fast growing tree that is straight and just a beautiful display with really cool flowers that you don't really get to thanks, Janice. You don't really get to see that often because they're usually way up in the canopy. Tulip tree, Lyrodendron tulipifera. This is why I hate common names, because it is neither a tulip nor a poplar, because the other name is yellow poplar or tulip poplar. It's not related to tulips. It's not related to poplars or aspens or cottonwoods, which are all part of the poplar genus. It's called tulip because the silhouette of the leaf is reminiscent of a tulip. Another alternative, you can never go wrong with an oak. Oaks are the best. Plant an oak in your yard. You can go to the next slide. And then, okay, just in general, for medium to moist soils, you got some shade, put a spice bush there. Smells incredible, beautiful red berries in the fall and winter. Edible, you can use them in your cooking. Winterberry holly, just perfect displays in the winter with that beautiful color. And it's one of the last kinds of berries that birds use in the winter. It's considered a low quality food source. That just means that it's got a little bit less fat, a little bit less calorie dense, but it's super native, it's super important, and it's native. And the birds will ultimately use that when they're running out of other food sources in February. And the plus side is you get to have those berries all winter long. And who doesn't love red twig dogwood? Great for medium and moist soils. And if you're on the other end of the spectrum, you can have 9-bark. I mean, look at that. So much prettier than a hydrangea to me. Just overflowing, just vomiting with those those white puffballs. I love it. Eastern redbud, one of the first things that bloom, and like an undeniable color there. The early queen emerging queen bumblebees love using that. Fragrant sumac, deer resistant, has an interesting smell to it, but it can be a really nice lower ground cover. Great for rocky soils. Birds and other wildlife love those berries. You can use those berries to make lemonade. It's great. Yeah, and then I just want to close with this idea that you often hear repeated, that, well, if we just let a space go and leave it to nature, nature will take care of itself. But that's no longer true. That hasn't been true really since the Columbian Exchange, but especially not since industrialization. We have fundamentally broken the paradigm. Those checks and balances do not exist anymore. And though if you think in the geologic time frame, in millions of years, where we are certainly wiped out by that point, yes, the Earth will rebound and will be resilient, and nature will ultimately have the last laugh. If we want, within the confines of the human species, to have anything close to resembling functional, ecological, biodiverse systems on our planet, we need to lend a helping hand, and we need to help direct these systems. Because if we leave them alone, we've just we we've we've messed up the disturbance regimes. Created these niches that invasives and all of these other kind of struggling with my words here, but we've created a system that is unable to function on its own anymore. And so it's going to need a little bit of a hand. And you see photos like that of the kudzu taking over, thousands of acres at a time. And you think that it could be hopeless, but we as a species have certainly, overcome worse. And we can get to the moon and do all of these incredible things with medicine. If we just had enough people thinking about these kinds of things and caring about these kinds of things, I don't see why we can't get invasive species to a point where they are under control in the same way that, we can get with our chemotherapy control these underlying tumors. So I think I just want to leave everybody with those kinds of thoughts. Hopefully it wasn't too uncomfortable, but it's important to get everybody thinking about these kinds of things. I'm assuming we probably don't have time for questions, Janice, but if
We can take questions if
sure.
people have them. I think it's great to, have discussion if it's there. So we do have a question in the chat. Is it ever good to manage against aggressive natives to increase biodiversity? If so, what do these cases look like?
Yeah, no, I would definitely say that there are times when I in my own career when I'm confronted with, it's often goldenrod, let's say a stand of a monoculture of goldenrod, and I might take out a large percentage of that goldenrod in order to create more an environment that's more conducive to greater biodiversity. Not because I think goldenrod is bad inherently, not because I don't respect its status as a keystone species, but because as habitat managers, even if that's just our own property, that's an important way to think about being a habitat manager. You are the habitat manager of your yard, whether you got a postage stamp or whatever. As managers, we need to think about biodiversity. But if you also elect to just keep it as a monoculture of an aggressive native, that's fine too. I love goldenrod. I love, common milkweed. I don't think there's any problem with that. Is creeping bellflower considered invasive? Yeah, I think it is. I don't know, Allison, have you seen it like out in wild settings?
I have not, but yeah, so I haven't in where I've been.
I've seen it in I've seen it as more of like a horticultural like garden weed more than anything. Like it pops up in like my garden beds, but I don't know. Yeah. In Michigan. Interesting. Do you see it pop up okay, you said okay, it's also in a garden. Yeah, that's where I'm seeing it. So I've seen it listed as either invasive or as a potential invasive. So when I see it, I pull it out. The bumblebees like it, but they don't necessarily know what's good for them, and I do.
Does anybody else have any questions for Antonia or Allison?
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys have any resources at the top of your mind where they talk about natives that are more endangered or need more help than others. Like the monarch butterfly was a big talk for there for a while, but it's not doesn't improve biodiversity as much as other species. So what species that may or may not be endangered, but increase the most biodiversity by planting them or improving their management?
Allison?
One that comes to mind is well, it's a little bit west of here. So if you're like Lorain County or west, is the blue lupin, Lupinus perennis is really good for the Carner blue butterfly, which is endangered. It's the only larval host for that butterfly. So I'll put the name of that in the chat. So because there is a non-native one or one that's from the Rocky Mountains, a different kind of lupin, and it can hybridize with that, and then it's no longer useful to the Carter blue butterfly. So I'll put the name of it on the here, lupinus. Can you think of one?
I would also add to that, just like just look up what your soil and light versus shade conditions are, and look up what native species thrive in those conditions, and then after one of those species, Google the word host, or host plant, and you'll see like what particularly insects, pollinators are going to depend on that plant, and you can find out if those are threatened and endangered, or not, or some more at risk. Couple questions. Maybe I missed one. Mary Lou asks if aquanite is the preferred do. Yeah, I when I'm using glyphosate, I'm always using an aquatic approved, whether I'm applying that near water or not. So for cut stump, I use aquanite or Roundup Custom, or there's a few different formulations. They're all the same. And I will mix that with a surfactant if I'm doing a foliar treatment, but I don't need to mix it with a surfactant if I'm doing cut stump.
Good stuff. I liked your conclusion, Antonio, that, and I totally agree that, a lot of people, I think nowadays, just kind of bringing it down to a local level, oh, if I just leave my yard, it will form a native meadow, and that's not necessarily the case. You know, could it look more natural? Sure, but you got to do some work to actually make it into a native landscape because our turf grasses are non-native. If you just let it go, then the non-native weeds come in. So it's great to hear that perspective of, we have to help, or else the problem's not gonna get better or go away. So thank you for that. And thank you, Allison. That was great. If anybody else thinks of any other questions, just throw them in the chat, and I'm sure we'll keep an eye on it and see, try and answer. Let me share my screen again. There we go. All right. And then I like to have the chat up on the side. Where did it go? Here it is. Okay. All right. So between October and November, we had a little bit of a slow month, which I get. Everybody's busy and everything like that. So we only have 3 new members since October. And I'm going to ask Kevin, is the Elizabeth O'Brien related to you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Most of my family comes from Pittsburgh
Oh,
area. So
nice.
yeah.
All right. As you may, our members were notified of our new board and officers for 2026. So I just want to take a quick moment to announce the board of directors for 2026. So we have president is Jessica Ostomer. She is one of the, or I should say, the founding uh, officer for Wild Ones Greater Cleveland. And she has been a past president, so she's going to be president again next year. We're very excited to see her goals and ambitions come to life. Sarah Blair is remaining as treasurer. And we have Raymond Stewart and Allison Welch, who you just heard from, are remaining board members for 2026. So send them a congrats or a round of applause if you get a minute. But we're very excited to see what unfolds for 2026. Some volunteer opportunities. I wanted to, and we'll get into the specifics of the events in a little bit, but I wanted to throw out, we have some January seed swaps coming up. So last January, we did our first inaugural seed swap. We had it at the Brecksville Library, and I think all of leadership agreed that it was a pretty good success. We had a great turnout. We had tons of seeds. We had a lot of fun. So we're actually splitting up where we're having them this year. We're having two. We're having one in Cuyahoga County in Beechwood at their library, and we're doing one in Summit County at the Fairlawn Library. So if you are interested in volunteering at our seed swaps, we do have some slots available. So it's things like helping set up or helping tear down. We have kind of a welcome table that you can sit at and have people sign in, and then also make sure that all the seeds are labeled correctly and have some nice resources available for people to look at. And then we also have, I called them general volunteers, but I like to think they were like the mix and minglers. It was basically just people walking around, answering questions on different plants, making sure that things stay organized, just kind of being those like ushers throughout the seed swaps. And then we also have we're going to be packing seeds as well. So we're going to have a little side table where you can package seeds, and we use those throughout the summer at our tabling events to give out for free. So we'll need a few people to sit at the table and help, people as they come in if they want to pack any seeds. So there, I can put the link in the chat unless someone else wants to grab it for me. But there's also a QR code to sign up, and it takes you to our sign up genius for both of those, and they're both in January, but we'll get to the dates in a second. Also, we're looking for an assistant social media chair. If you're savvy on Facebook and Instagram, and really like sharing content and being able to reach like-minded people, we'd love to have you help us out. We're also looking for assistant volunteer coordinator. This person mainly helps us during the warmer months. It kind of starts in April, maybe to July are I guess the busier months of helping coordinate where volunteers will be for our information tables. So that's basically like, for example, the Cleveland Metro Parks has their annual native plant sales in May, and we set up an information table there to help share the love and the word of native plants. And it's a great time to talk to people who love native plants as much as you do, or even don't know that much about it. So you get to tell them all about all the fun things about why native plants are important. So it's just a good way to help coordinate and organize our volunteers for those tabling efforts. So we had some recent events. Diab, our Cuyahoga County Regional Coordinator, hosted a hike in October. Great turnout, lovely weather to look at downtown, to see the fall foliage. It was a really good time. You can see downtown in the background there. And then we had our November book club, which was great. We read Robin Wall Kimmerer's The Service Berry. If you have not read it, I would 100% recommend. It is a short book. It's just over 200 pages, I think. But the author, Robin, also reads the audiobook herself. So anywhere you could listen to the book, like Libby, or it's even on Spotify, or anything like that, you can have Robin Wall Kimmerer serenade you as you listen to the book. And I will say it was very calming, and just hearing her voice, it made it 100 times better. So if you can, we would recommend that. But obviously, not everybody can sit and listen to things. So, hey, reading the book was just as good. So we had this discussion with partnership with the Cleveland Public Library System. We were up at their Woodland campus on the east side, and we even did a ceremonial service berry tree planting out front. It was right out front, right by the front door. So it's very exciting. So if you go to the Woodland campus, make sure to check out our cute little service berry tree out front. And they also had gotten a few, they were pretty small, what I would consider whips of other service berry trees that we planted within their bioswale that is also on the campus. So in risk, since they were so tiny, we didn't want to risk them being run over by a lawnmower. So that's why we planted them in the swale. Wanted to make sure that you can see how tiny, he's a little stem right there. We wanted to make sure they had the best chance of survival. So it was a lot of fun, and it was a great discussion. So yeah, highly recommend reading that book. As far as upcoming events, we love throwing a party every year at the end of the year to celebrate what we've accomplished and to share with you all what we are planning for next year. And this is that event. It's our annual meeting, holiday celebration. It's going to be the evening of Thursday, December 4th, up in Lakewood. It's one of the Cleveland Metro Parks. They're in the Rocky River Reservation, the Emerald Necklace Marina. They have during the summer when the marina's open, they have a little cafe open there with an event space attached to it. So we'll be in that event space. Tickets are free for members or $10 for non-members. Again, I'm shouting out. There you go. Thank you. The link was just added in the chat for finding information out about that and registering. We're going to have some crafts. We're going to have Garrett Ormiston from the Museum of Natural History come and speak with us. We're going to have heavy appetizers and a cash bar. So come hungry and come ready for a good time. We're going to have bingo with prizes. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. So the seat swaps. Here's the dates for you. Write them down. For Summit County, it's Saturday, January 10th at the Fairlawn Bath Branch Library. And then the Cuyahoga one is the Saturday, January 17th at the Beechwood Branch Library. So we're very excited. Come bring your native seeds to share. If you go to, and maybe Jessica, you can post this, If you go to the event on our website and hit more information, it actually shows you a few graphics on how you can collect and clean your seeds before you come to the seed swap. And then what do we do with those seeds? We sow them, of course. So we have a bunch of winter sowing workshops that are coming up as well. These are, I think, if you talk to any of our leadership members, I think these are some of our favorite events, the winter sowing to do through the year. So our first one is down in Stark County, near in Canton, with Stark Parks. It's Thursday, the 8th in the evening at Cibbo Lake Park. There is registration through the parks that you need to sign up for. We have another one with Portage Parks that's going to be at their operations center in Ravenna on Saturday the 31st. We will have registration coming soon for that one. It's not up yet. And then lastly on the books, we have Cuyahoga, which will be Saturday, February 7th from 2 to 4:30. That one's going to be in Ohio City at Blue Jay Retail. So this one's a little bit of a different venue than we normally do. Blue Jay Retail has a space in the back where she has been doing community workshops, mostly with plants. And she had Meadow City Nursery out not too long ago. And then we also have our friends from Deep Roots Living Soil that are going to come and introduce some of their soil products. And that's what we're going to use for the winter sowing. So I'm very excited about that. Plus, if you want, you can do a little shopping, take home some flowers. It's going to be great. And that registration is also coming soon. We're going to do a native seed packing event for those in Lorain County, or if you would like to travel to Lorain County and you're close by, on Sunday, January 11th. And this is going to be at our board member Ray Stewart's house. We have done other events like this before, and Ray has hosted other events like this before. He has a whole list of seeds that he has that he has set and ready to go to be packed in envelopes. So it's good for social. If you are already missing getting your hands on the natural world, it's, it's November 18th. You could be suffering already from a little bit of seasonal sads. So you can always come and touch some seeds and pack some in an envelope with us to use throughout the year. All right. So we've made it this far. Look, it's 8:29. It's perfect timing. Thank you all for being here tonight. I will say this will be my last chapter meeting as chapter president. So I love that there's so many participants on here tonight. Thank you so much. And this is actually our last chapter meeting of 2025. December, we won't have one of these because we do have that annual meeting holiday celebration, and you'll see us again in January. And we'll do a little recap of how that holiday celebration went, and I think do a little review on winter sowing. We'll see what happens, but we're really glad that you were here tonight, and thank you again, Allison and Antonio, for that great presentation on invasives. I learned something new, so thank you so much. If you can, share us with your friends and family if they too are native friendly. And if someone in your life needs to be a little bit more native friendly, you can also share us to those people too, like those friends that plant barberry. And I think that's it. It's 8:31. So thanks everybody for being here and have a great holiday season.